right, if you're watching this, you are watching the raw, unedited version of Ask the Podcast Coach with Dave Jackson. Although Dave is out today, I'm running, Jim Collison here, running things behind the scenes. All logged into my account, so if you're watching this shouldn't seem unusual to you. But we are broadcasting live right now over at AskThePodcastCoach.com/live. We do, as tradition on my shows, we do a little pre-show. I know on Dave's stuff that he oftentimes just jumps right in on the live stuff, but I like to fire up the live stream and get it rolling and gather the folks in the chat room. And so if this automatically came on, it might have for you. We got about 4 or 5 minutes. Get logged into chat. Get yourself cup of coffee, cup of Joe, whatever you drink in the morning, and get ready to go. We'll get started here in just a minute. If you're listening on Spreaker, again, you might be expecting Cyber Frontiers or Home Gadget Geeks. I'm hosting Ask the Podcast Coach this morning, so that's why this is in the feeds here. So if you got notification from me that this was out there and you're like, what the heck is going on? We do this podcast every Saturday morning, 9:30 Central, 10:30 Eastern, out at AskThePodcastCoach.com/live. Love to have you join us. It's really podcasting. I'm here with Mike Howard today. Mike, how are you?
Morning, I'm fine. I think this is my first time on Ask Podcast Coach.
I think it is. We don't do many guests, so it's with either if I'm out, Dave will have somebody on. Of course, this is the first time he's out, and I'm having you on. So welcome.
I listen every Saturday morning almost, and I don't think I've called in ever before, or maybe I did once. I think I did once. Talk about something. Don't remember what that was.
You did call in?
Showtime.
You know, I think I did. I don't remember what that was for now.
Did you use like Skype to log in?
You're going to question me on it, and I'm not going to know the answer now.
That's fine. Let's see. We're also live on Spreaker. I'll let the chat room know if they want to do audio only on Spreaker. Here. Randy, welcome out there. Joe, good to see you. Welcome in. I start a little early. When I do the podcast, I like to start a few minutes early just to kind of say hi to the chat room, get all that stuff out of the way 5 or so minutes before. We're live on Blog Talk Radio as well. That is, if you want to call in your questions, that's all queued up and ready to go. So you can call those in. 347. Oh, hey, hold on. I have to practice the. If you want to make those calls, call in. Use this number, right? 347-850-8007. That's the number to call in if you want to get your questions in. How'd I do?
Pretty good, Jim.
No, that's not the one we want to leave that one. For some reason, the audio player is set on play the next one. I can't get that one. I can't get that turned off, so it automatically goes to the next track. So I'll have to remember to
stop it.
To hit pause. Yeah, at that point, about 2 minutes on Blog Talk Radio. So if you want to call it in, 347. You could any Saturday morning you can do this if you're watching this. 347-850-8007. We're live on Spreaker. I dropped that in the chat room. If you need audio only, you want to go out there. That's my live page as well. I had to send that to Dave so he can maybe. He's out, but he's not completely out. He may make an appearance.
Hey, Jim, going live like you are now a little earlier.
1 minute until showtime.
I like to do that too, just in case there's any issues. You know, sometimes you can have with a guest, you can have an audio issue or something like that. Just get all that kind of worked out, or you can have a streaming issue. Get that worked out right before you go live.
Yeah, I think, and then I just go back in and edit this out. You know, we're going to download the video and edit it and put the show intro and the music and cards and all that stuff in there.
One thing I learned from you is because I do the same thing. I edit out the intro and the exit and all that kind of stuff, so you have a clean start, clean ending. But YouTube still records that file with that 10-minute intro of just chit-chatting. And I learned from you how you, at the very start of that, say, if you're watching this, you're getting the raw version or whatever, skip ahead 10 minutes. So I've had to add that in there, too, because people will listen. You know, people are not going to listen for 10 minutes of junk to get to your show.
4, 3.
Hold on one sec. We'll let Blog Talk Radio do its thing, and then let it go through
Blog
here.
Talk Radio.
Yeah, because what I've found is if you don't say that, especially in the show title, sometimes if you put like Amazon Echo review, they come in expecting this 2-minute, because everybody does these 2 or 3 minute reviews. Hey, I've had this for 10 seconds and now I'm going to review it for you, and they do these 3-minute reviews, hoping to go viral, and we just don't do that. So they expect that, and I'm like, well, I even said last week in my show, if you're listening to this won't be short. In fact, it'll be really, really long. You'll be here for the next hour. So, buckle in, because that's what you get. So I think that's important, because people expect to find that, short stuff on YouTube. Excuse me. All right, well, Blog Talk Radio is running. I think you guys, let's get a quick sound check. Can you hear us?
Sounds good here.
And of course, right before I go, I get a little. Right before we go.
Oh, we got some water right before the show.
I know. Room temperature water is what Addie says when we.
Yeah, so I don't make. I actually get ice in it, so probably be a little better if I got room temperature water. But I do make sure I have water for each show. Have it here.
No, it's good to have. You want to have that.
Make sure you don't
close by.
Maybe you need a sippy cup.
We'll talk about that. We will talk about that. That's a scary thought. Sarah, on Thursday night, she brought down a beer, and she almost put it in a sippy cup. Can you guys hear us? I'd like to get, you can hear on Spreaker. Perfect. On YouTube. I guess I can go out there and check that myself. I have that capability. Let's make sure we are. It started, and then people are like, "No, I can't." Oh, great! Error connecting to the database.
What error connecting to that? What database?
Well, when I go to Dave's live page right now, it says error connecting to the database.
Oh, if this is if once you connect, you're good, as long as you don't try and refresh, because the YouTube feed's coming straight from YouTube, and the Chatwing's coming straight from Chatwing, not from Dave's site.
Yeah.
But
here I'll throw the.
Let me go to it on the machine.
Now, Randy says we're good on YouTube, so I'll throw that link in. That's the plus page, and this is if you're on Chatwing, it's chatwing.com /school podcasting.
So this is his website is having an issue.
Yeah, I need to get him on Maple Grove Partners. That's all there is to it. All right, let's do this thing. May the 9th, you ready?
Yep.
Okay, here we go. Ask the Podcast Coach for May 9th, 2015.
Let's get ready to podcast.
All right, it's time for another Saturday morning of Ask the Podcast Coach. This may be really weird for you, because this is me giving the intro and not Dave Jackson. Dave is out, like he likes to say when I'm gone. Dave is out on assignment, and it's just me, Jim Collison, your host today, broadcasting live out of the AverageGuy.tv studios this morning. I'm kind of running the show. Surprisingly, we got it done. So I think we're up and on the air, and everything's working here. And then sitting across from me is the guy that I use all the time when I need help around podcasting, Mike Howard. Mike, good morning.
Good morning. Beautiful morning here in Atlanta.
Yeah, it is. It's a beautiful day here in Nebraska, but we are expecting some. We're expecting some storms this afternoon, and it could get a little ugly on us. So we had one of the areas not far from here, 6 inches of rain in an evening, and it just flooded the place out. So, well, we're here to talk podcasting, all things podcasting. If you want to join us with the call in, you can call that in. And Dave was kind enough to send me over all the music stuff, so we got to throw that in as well. If you want to give us a phone call through Skype, whatever, 347-850-8007 is that number. Give us a call. Blog Talk Radio is waiting for your phone calls, and so we like to have you call in. Oops, see, there's the
I forgot to
That's
remind.
the thing. Yeah, or you got to stop it, right? Otherwise, the music keeps playing. Mike, long time. I mean, I think you've listened to Ask the Podcast Coach since we started this. I mean, I think you were out there with me as we kind of birthed this thing. For those of you who don't know the story, Dave was just messing around with trying live. Mike, you and I have always been live guys. That's kind of just the way we started, right? When we did it, Dave was messing around with it. And so we jumped in. You're out there every week, but let's talk a little bit about your podcast, JPEG to RAW, for photographers. Kind of give us an idea of what you do.
Yeah, so Jim, we started live. I've never done a single show not live, actually, for JPEG to RAW. JPEG to RAW is a photography show, like you said. We mix guests. We sometimes have guests come in. Sometimes it's just me and the host. We talk about photography-related stuff. We talk about everything from children photography, wedding photography, to boudoir photography, which Jim really liked that show.
It wasn't bad. I'm not going to lie. It wasn't bad.
and we do all of ours live. We do stream through live YouTube Live, embedded on our site, like Dave has here with Chatwing as our chat room. And we use, I don't think y'all use this, we use vMix, which is a video switching software. I've used XSplit, Wirecast, and now we're on vMix, and I like it by far the most. And that gives us, the reason we use that is because I want to do picture-in-picture slideshows and different things like that, and it gives us the power to do that.
Yeah, we'll talk about that a little bit more as we dig in some, because we don't. That's kind of advanced podcasting, I think. When we talk about the video, it gets fairly complex. As soon as you start, we do Google Plus, so the video piece here is pretty easy that we're doing because we're just taking advantage of Google Plus. But the vMix component moves it up a little bit. So talk a little bit about your evolution so we'll call this kind of going beyond Google Plus, right? You were doing this, and then because it's a photography podcast, you wanted to show pictures, and that's always not as easy to do in a Hangout. I mean, you can get it done. There's ways of doing it, but you wanted to kind of amp it up a little bit. So talk a little bit about your evolution to get where you're at today.
Yeah, you definitely don't have to do what I'm doing. I wanted to be able to show photos in a slideshow type format that were there as either something we would talk about, an individual photo, or having as a slideshow playing through as we talked about whatever, just general talking. And I also wanted to be able to do picture-in-picture where we'd have a photo slideshow going on with our thumbnails on the screen at the same time. We used Google Plus for a while, but the problem is you can't change where the little thumbnails are, and every time I'd move my mouse over across top of that screen, the little header would drop down. So we started off with XSplit. XSplit is cheap. I think it's like $65 a year or every 2 years, something like that. Really nice and simple, but it doesn't do everything you want to do. It doesn't do everything you want to do. So we moved to Wirecast, and that is a much more advanced software, and it's much more expensive. It's $495, I believe, for that one-time fee, and then every upgrade you got to pay for. And it was really good, except for it's hard when you start doing this kind of stuff. It is hard on the CPU, because you're recording locally, which I like to record local, and you are streaming. And when you're streaming, you're streaming an H.264, and that can get really, really hard on the CPU. So I was running somewhere between 70 and 80% on my Core i7 CPU, and you start having video audio sync issues. So we switched over to vMix, which allows for most of that compression to happen on the video card, and it's night and day. Same. Actually, we're recording at 1080p, so we're recording a higher quality than we were with Wirecast, but vMix is only running around 25 to 30% CPU, so it's just really smooth, and gives you the option to click in and out of different shots. You can have almost unlimited shots that you want to pull up. The one downside, I'd tell you, Jim, is that as I'm talking to the guest, I'm talking to you, and I'm trying to do live production, and then I'm trying to watch chat to work that into the conversation, I can't do all three very well. And I often will mess up, and the chat will throw me. So I'm going to ask a great question I want to interject into the show, and it's totally thrown me off as I try and work that in. So one of the things I'm going to try in the future is to have my co-host, who is generally just taking down notes, is have him work those questions into the show, and me pay less attention to the chat. I'm not capable of doing all three at the same time.
Yeah, Mike, it's actually the way we do it at Gallup. So while I'm the host, my job is to really get the show started and then monitor the chat room for my co-host, who's really going to do the interview. So I open it, get everything going. I'm kind of there to make sure the technology works. To be honest with you, but the added benefit is we get two voices on there as opposed to one, and then I turn it over to my co-host, and he does the full interview. I'm monitoring the chat room, making sure everybody's in there and not having problems getting connected. By the way, getting connected was a problem for Dave's site this morning. So if you're listening live either on Spreaker or on the YouTube channel, head over to the chat room, chatwing.com/School of Podcasting. That's where the chat room is. A little difficult to get to that this morning. We got to get Dave's site fixed with some of his database backup. He's just been doing this so long. I think his back-end database has just gotten kind of wonky, and it's time to clean that up, export everything out, re-import it in a fresh database, and call it good. But so yeah, Mike. So for us, that works really well to have that co-host. That's the model that we use, to have that co-host be kind of the ringleader.
Yeah.
Somebody watching chat, somebody making sure, because it's hard sometimes. One of the big mistakes you make is you get so involved in what you're doing with chat and everything else. The guest is talking, they say something, you end up asking the very next thing you say. You ask a question about what they just said, and you don't know it, and you don't hear it until after you go back and listen, to the show again, which can be a real problem.
That is a fear of mine. If you're watching a morning talk show or something on TV, you've probably seen a host do that before, where they ask a question, you go, "You idiot! They just said that. Why are you asking that again?" And so, if, as a listener, or maybe even as the guest, if you do that to them, that's what they're thinking. What are you talking about? I just said that. And my fear is that I'm going to do that because I'm so distracted. And that is one of the disadvantages to doing something like a vMix. Is that it does add some complexity to it, and the thing that I would say is you don't want to be trying new things show night. You want to be with something like vMix, Wirecast, VidBlaster, or even XSplit. You want to be doing all your testing way beforehand, and then have everything set up and ready to go for show night.
Yeah.
It does give it.
Let me just say quick, Nick's Suberling in chat had said he'd used that before XSplit. I think he said XSplit. And it just got too complicated, and Hangout on Air was just fine.
Right. Yeah, this definitely isn't needed for a lot of people.
Hey, real quick, we got a caller, so we haven't done this yet. This is the first time I've done this testing. Maybe later in the show I'll talk about I do it completely different than Dave does, but we'll turn him on here, get him in, and we'll say number ending in 6155. You're on Ask the Podcast Coach. Tell us who you are and your question.
Hey, what's up, guys? It's Nick Suberling.
Hey, speaking of Nick, how's it going, Nick?
I'm doing all right. How about you guys?
Yeah, we're doing okay. We still have the same latency issues that we have with when we're doing this on Dave's equipment. So things are about a second behind. But thanks for calling in. It's kind of weird taking the call when normally Dave does it.
Well, hey, there's a first time for everything, right? I'm here on Ask the Podcast Coach.
You bet. Thanks for calling in. You got a question for us? Comment?
I do. Last week I was able to broadcast my podcast Inside the Jungle. Last week was the NFL Draft, and so we did our very first live remote broadcast of our show, and we were on location, and I opened up a brand new Mackie 1402 VLZ Form audio mixer the night of the show, about 2 hours before we were set to go live. And so it's the first time using this equipment. I have an 802 Mackie mixer, but this is the first time moving up to a much larger mixer with more inputs. And so I borrowed 4 ATR 2100 microphones from another podcaster friend of mine. And when I plugged them into the mixer, I could not get any audio from them unless I had these solo buttons pressed in on the Mackie mixer. Now, I don't know if you have any experience with that mixer, but could you maybe possibly explain why I was unable to get any audio from those ATRs?
Mike, you've got the Mackie mixer there. That's your mixer of choice. No, yeah. but still same brand.
Yeah, on mine I have the ProFX 8, and I'm looking at mine to see if I have the solo press, and I don't have the solo pressed.
So, and do they have Nick? Does that have groups on that Mackie mixer? It's not possible that a group thing got turned on and everything got turned down for that particular group, and so when you hit solo, of course, that isolates the channel. Is that something like that possible?
It's possible. Again, I opened it fresh out of the box, and I was messing with some of the buttons based on just kind of memory from my 802 mixer. I thought maybe it had something to do with the phantom power, but that didn't seem to help the issue either. In the end, in the grand scheme of things, I was able to at least broadcast with the solo buttons pressed in, but it also meant that I couldn't bring in my guest audio for whatever reason. It was a struggle that night, but it was just odd. I plugged in these 4 ATRs and I got nothing. And I guess I was expecting to get audio from these things. It's the first time I've used ATR 2100s as well. So maybe there was something I missed on the actual Microsoft. I made sure that they were on. I did flip the on switch on those microphones. But I just thought it was odd that I got absolutely nothing from them unless I pressed the solo button in.
Yeah, no, that is odd. It shouldn't work that way. You know, the 2100s are a pretty basic mic. They don't need phantom power. Although if you have it turned on, it's not the end of the world. It'll work just fine with phantom power on. That's been my experience. The real audio guys will probably say no, don't have that turned on for sure. But it you don't need it from that standpoint. And then it does speak to a good point of, you know, don't give yourself, and I'm not chastising you, Nick, but don't give yourself 2 hours on a live setup with a new piece of equipment, right? Because you can run into those oddities where
I totally agree. That was a rookie mistake on my part.
Well, and I would have done it too, to be honest with you. I've done stuff like that where I'm in a pinch for time and I need equipment. I just buy it and I'm thinking, okay, how hard can this be? Well, that mixer's fairly complicated. You got buttons everywhere. And you know, even were you running it USB in to be recorded? Was that how you were getting the sound in?
No. I don't even think this has USB capabilities.
Okay. Yeah. So you know, it's got a bunch of stuff. How many channels is on that again?
14.
14, and so you have
XLR inputs. 6
XLRs. Okay. Yeah, and so chances are you could have, you know, what I found in every new mixer that I've gotten my hands on, there are always a couple switches that are like, okay, send this to the mains, or send this to the monitor, or send this to the USB. And if you don't get those pressed, sometimes then that main mix, any of it, will not go where it's intended to go. And those buttons are sometimes, you know, buried deep in the board somewhere, or, you know, where it doesn't always make sense for them to be on. I know I have the Multimix 8, and it's got 3 of those buttons, you know, mix to main, mix to monitors, mix to USB. And if I don't have those selected, if they're not pushed down, I won't get anything. Now the solo could be, and I don't know. We'll see. Maybe somebody in chat will jump in here, but that solo sometimes overrides you know, the channel so that you can hear it. It's intended for the audio producer to be able to hear that channel all by itself, right? That's kind of the purpose of that solo button. And so, yeah, I don't know. It's hard without knowing that board. It's hard to know, but it's one of those things. Are you going to keep it? Is that something you're going to hold on to?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. The main reason I got it is because it has 2 mix minuses. So now I can actually bring in an additional laptop and use the second mix minus and have the 2 computers kind of that way. If I host a Hangout on Air on one computer and then have my Skype callers, I could bring them in on a separate audio channel on a laptop, and now I can have the 2 kind of communicate without having any issues. So I'm definitely keeping it. Really, do I need 6 XLR inputs for just me in the studio? No, but it's helpful having the additional mix minus.
Yeah, Nick, what was the retail on that? What'd you pay for it?
$399.
Okay, so not terrible from that standpoint. I think anything under $500 for a mixer. Mike, I didn't let you talk. Anything else on that? You're a Mackie guy. Anything that I missed?
No, I was just looking at my board. I actually don't even have a solo button, so I've not experienced that. I do know that on my board, at least, the ATR 2100 requires a lot of gain. And so much gain that I was getting static from the board, and got DBX 166XS gate limiter to provide cleaner gain plus some other things, because that the ATR just needed so much gain.
Yeah, Nick, I think that's one thing we recommend these 2100s to everybody, but they are gain hungry. So whatever you're going to use, you're going to have to crank that gain way up to get it, to Mike's point. And then Joe in chat said he's been using the Mackie 1402 for about 2 years, and he's yet to figure out how to get sound without the solo button pressed. So maybe that's.
Well, I've got it figured out here in studio, but I'm not using ATR 2100s. When I plugged in my Sennheiser E835 mic, it seemed to be just fine. Also, there was a couple other buttons that I had pressed that I didn't need to have pressed, but I don't know if that really had anything to do with it. But I could be wrong. But yeah, once I got back in studio, back home, the mixer seemed to be cooperating with me, and I'm able to talk right now. I'm actually on my microphone calling via Skype, and I'm able to talk without the solo buttons pressed in, thankfully. So appreciate you guys taking my call. I'm going to enjoy the rest of this hour.
Thanks, Nick. Great having you on. Well, speaking of guests, Smiling Dave Jackson has joined us from some stairwell somewhere. Dave, how are you?
Good. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I'm. It's very bizarre. I'm at Stark State University for WordCamp North Canton, and this is where I graduated with my electronics degree. So I just attended a Facebook ad session in my old psychology room. So it's been very interesting. That's gotta be a little odd. It is very odd. It's a lot of flashbacks, but good stuff. I attended Dustin Hartzler's session on podcasting, which was very nice of him because at the end he mentioned me as a resource, so that was kind of fun. But yeah, so have you? I meant to send you a link. I don't know if I can do this on my iPhone. It's heavily rumored now, according to an article that I read yesterday. Spotify is getting into podcasting. It's not official, but there was an article on SoundCloud saying how SoundCloud had come out of beta, blah, blah, blah. And it said, as other companies are getting into podcasting, like blah, 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 and Spotify. And I went, I've heard that rumored, but that was the first time that really made it look like that was a fact that they're on their way in. And I was like, So. Yeah. No, it's good. I think that's a good, it's good to have them maybe jumping on board with us. Yeah, so. Did you just get done teaching or doing your session, or what's the deal? I'm on break right now for the next about 8 minutes, and I thought I would pop in and be on this side of the fence for a change. Yeah, how does it feel? Mike and I, as we were talking about this earlier, sometimes it's hard for the host to give up their show. This is the first time we've done this where I've got complete control. By the way, I set everything up, no mix minuses in any of this. So I was able to figure out a way to do it. We'll have to talk about that maybe a little bit later in the show. But how does it feel to give up your show? I mean, this is a common podcaster problem. It was weird. 10:30 rolled around, and I was like, wow, this is they're starting without me. But on the other hand, this is kind of a testament to you. It's like, I know my baby's in good hands, and I know you're bringing on Mike. I'm like, all right, this is cool. And, in the end, I'm here to, we're here to serve our audience and to provide that service and to, be there for the community. And I was like, well, we just missed a week not too long ago with NMX, and I'm like, you know what, let's and you know me, I love to experiment. So let's try a week without me, and, maybe it'll be better. Well, I doubt that. Do you? It has been fun, though. I'm not going to lie. One of my favorite things to do is to do this. I love having the music at my fingertips. Right, 347-850-8007. Right, if you're going to call in. We had Nick call in a little bit earlier, so that was fun. Now I have to remember to shut that off so that it doesn't. Well, I was going to ask you. I was going to actually hang up and call in. I was like, maybe we should experience that as well. It seems to be working, which is, to me, the crazy part of all this is as I got started with it last night, and I'm thinking, okay, I need to make this work.
And actually I spilled some water on my mixer on Thursday night or Wednesday night right before a show. It's gone. So I had to go out and get a whole new. I'm using a USB audio interface to make this work. So I called Mike Howard. I talk about this on the show all the time. I called Mike last night. Hey, we got to test this thing. I mean, nothing like waiting till the last hour. So I was up till midnight testing it, and I learned some interesting things about it. I'm kind of glad in some ways it happened because you get. Now I have some new experience with an audio interface as opposed to using a mixer.
Jim, is Sarah, your wife, bringing you all your drinks in sippy cups?
Yeah, everything now has to have a lid. So.
Nice. Yeah.
Well, you shouldn't drink around your equipment. So, Dave, what equipment are you calling in on? Because the audio is actually not bad. I mean, it's roomy, but what are you calling in on?
We're using, this is it. I got my earbuds plugged in. I'm streaming via Wi-Fi. There's a serious delay between your voice and the actual video that I'm looking at, but this is just my iPad. That's it. Just thought I would connect and see what's going on, but if I wanted to, that's a really good shot. But that's the campus behind me, and I was trying to find a quiet place, and all their classrooms that we're not using today are locked and there's sessions going on. I basically left this session a little early, and I'm basically in a stairwell, and of course being Saturday there's no students here, so I thought, well, it'll be a little boomy, but a place to sit down at least.
No, actually, the sound's tolerable. I mean, I wouldn't want to host it this way. Right. It is interesting. We're getting really good sound from you, and the latency isn't bad at all. The audio is a little shaky, but Mike, I mean, from your end, the audio is pretty good, right?
Absolutely. I don't hear much breaking up in the audio at all, and I can understand them, completely. Yeah.
Yeah. So I thought of it today, though. I'm assuming you're recording this as an audio file as well. Somewhere?
Well, so I'll have I'm recording on YouTube as well as on Spreaker, so I'll have both for you as we get to that. So
yeah, it's cool. Yeah, that'll be great. So awesome. Well, I will. I don't want to. I got to run anyway. There's another session coming, but I just wanted to pop in just to see if I could.
Yeah.
And I've never done this on an iPad. And carry on, gentlemen, and I will see you next week.
We haven't driven this thing into the ground yet, so thanks for letting me have control of the steering wheel, Dad.
How do I get out of this thing? Can you kick me out?
Let's see. I think you just hit the hang up button.
Here we go. Here's the hang up button. I got one.
Bye, Dave.
Goodbye,
Thanks
gentlemen.
for calling in. Oh, it's kind of fun.
Yeah.
It's it still amazes me. I was talking to some junior hires yesterday, and Mike, when we were kids, we dreamt of this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, of video conferencing all over the world. I do these with Gallup. I do these in India and in Singapore and Australia and Berlin and in London. And here we have Dave out remote coming in on Wi-Fi off his iPad. Not bad. Not a bad connection,
I remember back in I think it was the 80s, whenever there was a Sharper Image catalog that had your house phone with a little bitty screen on it, and thinking, oh, that is going to be so cool the day whenever you can, make a phone call and be able to see the other person, and how far things have come now that we can do things like that. Yep.
Yeah. So anything you want to finish before Dave jumped in? We were talking about video.
Yeah, I think we kind of covered the vMixing. It's definitely not for everybody, and I would just say if you're going to use something like that, if you're looking at them, vMix has a 60-day trial, free trial, fully functional, everything. Wirecast has one. BitBlaster has one. The two of those do have some limitations or some things they put over top of the video. So before you make the purchase, give it a try. So that was really all I had to say there. If anybody has any questions or want to discuss vMix or anything like that.
Well, two really hard. What we just talked about are two of the hardest parts of podcasting, probably, if you're going to think about this. One is when you introduce video, it gets much more complex, and then two, when you introduce mixers and audio interfaces. I mean, if you're going to take an ATR 2100 direct connect it via USB to your computer, super simple. We do that all the time. Anytime you add any other additional equipment in, it's going to get pretty complex pretty fast. And you and I spend a lot of time testing when we do that.
It does, it does get complicated, and I take it maybe sometimes to levels that I don't need to. But on top of the video, I actually have 3 computers involved in my production. Two of them are really just, as far as the show goes, really just Skype computers. That's really all they're used for, and then the one broadcast server. But if you want to have more in-depth conversation about that, that we can't have here on the show, and even have me show you some stuff, feel free to email me at podcast@jpadraw.com, or connect with me on Facebook or something like that.
Yeah, Mike, you're always super helpful for me. I mention you all the time when we are here on the show because you're kind of my podcast accountability partner. We actually learn a lot from each other. I started on video, kind of got you going, and then you just blew past me from a technology standpoint. I have not followed you in that, but we've upgraded our equipment together. We share a lot of, hey, I just tried this, right? You should try this too. So I always appreciate that.
Well, there's no one model that works for everybody. What you're doing works for you, and what you're doing will probably work for me too. I like the geeky side of that. So podcasting serves multiple things for me. It gives me a chance to talk about photography because I love talking about photography. I love meeting the guest and meeting new people that I wouldn't have an opportunity really to meet if it wasn't for the podcasting. And then I love the technical side of that too, and working through the problems and that kind of stuff. So if you want to talk more about that, let me know. I did want to talk, if you want to, about guest.
Yeah, let's do it.
We were talking about this in the past, is that sometimes, or for me, I'll just speak for me, it doesn't necessarily come with anybody else, is that you get some guest on the show that you feel completely relaxed with, and some of it is them, some of it is me, and what my feelings are that night. Feel completely relaxed with, and you end up having a good conversation that it seems more natural. And then there's other guests that you may be either you're off, or you may feel a little intimidated by this guest, and I feel it personally, not so much during the show and during the talk about whatever the interview process, let's say, but I feel it really the most at the beginning and the end when I'm doing my little intro, and I don't do a big intro, and then the exit where I put more stuff at the exit where I'm talking about how to subscribe and join our Facebook group and all those kind of things. And in the back of my mind with some guests, I have this clock going on that they may not be feeling this way, but I feel this way, that I need to get through this stuff because they're bored, or they're wondering why is Mike wasting my time with this section. And that's more me than them. But do you ever have that feeling where you feel a little off or a little intimidated with different guests?
Yeah, for sure. I get some on there, and I feel like I'm not my best. Like you mentioned, I might feel like, ooh, you're reading their body language. They're already bored, or they're like, man, how did I get stuck doing this? Why did I say yes to this? Yes. Kind of deal. And then I feel like I start in baseball. They say short hopping it, right? Which is and I don't do as well, and I get intimidated. I don't ask the harder questions that I should ask. Oftentimes I'll start ignoring the chat room, right? So normally when I'm like you and I are talking, I know that if something happens to me and I can't talk for a few minutes, I know you can fill the space, right? You'll recognize, ooh, I should fill this in, right? Kind of deal. You're good at this from that standpoint. But with some of those guests, if you're not asking questions every second, you're carrying that interview, because if you stop talking, it's going to be dead air, for minutes. And so you're like, so you ignore the chat room, and I don't feel, so that's one of those things I'm still working on, like how to set it up when I have the more important or the more famous or whatever, just me being intimidated by him, where it's like, how do I continue to still be me without, because people listen because it's me, right? I mean, they're coming to hear you. That's why they come. So that's been tough for me too, for sure.
That's something. The other thing I've found with guests, and in my show, we're probably about 80% guests that we have, so people listening know, is I sometimes have a preconceived notion of the guest, thinking that this person is not going to be very interesting. And it typically happens, as the show gotten more popular, we have people contact us and want to come on the show. And you've heard that story, I don't want to be part of a group that wants me in their group, or however that goes. I don't want to join a club that wants to have me as a member. So I have that feeling when whoever wants to come on my show who's contacted me, not sure I want them as a guest. And
right.
And
I know where you're going with this, right? If they're contacting you,
yes,
you're like, I want this to be hard to get this guest, right? I want to work for it. Otherwise, this could just be a disaster.
And it could just be blind luck for me so far. But every single one that I've then had on the show, I've been after the fact gone, wow, I don't know what my problem was. This really turned out well. This is a really good guest. So trying to, be a little more open to that and letting those guys come on the show.
Yeah. No, it's having guests if you're going to do it that way. And, I know there's solo podcasters that do it without guests, and that works fine too. But that guest component's tough, and especially like we do tech industry guests, and I oftentimes will invite them without even hearing them. And so you're taking a risk. Like you're like, well, they're going to come on with some equipment. I've been surprised. I've had some guests on where I've had them on multiple times, and each time their audio has gotten worse, not better. And I kind of want to say, I want to keep having you on the show. Could you just go buy a microphone? Because it's worth the $50 for once a quarter for you to represent your company well. And you might just want to have a microphone. Now, you hate that. That sounds pretty, that sounds kind of diva-ish, right? From that standpoint. So it's it's the trick to getting guests, and I found for me recently is I get about half my guests from Twitter and from news, and so I target small startups that are interesting or have niche products or gadgets around the home and stuff, and I'll shoot them a note on Twitter. Will you come on the show? And I send a link, and I almost never beg, and I don't hunt. So if they don't respond back to me, chances are I'm just not gonna, I'm not gonna go after them again, unless I really want to. And I don't think I have, but through Twitter. And then like this week, Mike, I've been at a couple conferences and I've run into some really interesting people, and I had some new cards made up for the podcast. And I would say, hey, I'm a podcaster. I'd love to have you on. Would you be interested in coming on the show and talking about what you do? And they almost always say yes at that point. Give them the card, then we connect afterwards and get them on. So I have a couple guests coming on just from folks that I've met over the last couple weeks at these tech conferences, and that's a great way to get new guests in. And then I've had some guests roll off. So I've had some folks that I've had on before, even a couple times, and I've reached out to them again and said, hey, I'd love to have you on, and they've just said, no, I'm not ready to come on yet. I don't really have that much to say, and or I'm not in that space anymore, or some of those kinds of things. So have you had multiple guests? You've had repeat? I mean,
I've had some repeat on the
guest, right?
Yeah, the guest adds another complexity to the show, and for the fear that I have, as Joe said out there in chat, and is that where you get a guest on, I've got my questions. I always have some questions. It's just more talking points to get me started, and then I generally let the conversation go as how it's going to go. But it's some bullet points there for me to ask questions. My fear is that I'm going to ask a question, the answer that I'm going to get back. So let's say I ask, tell me about how you got in photography and what all you do, and the answer is, yeah. It's a one-word answer, and I'm thinking this is going to be a 15-minute show because it's not going to take long. I haven't had that yet. But the other challenge, of course, is one, booking them, and two, them canceling right before the show. Those are both risks. In the photographer space, hopefully there's no photographers listening, but hey, I'm in that group with you, so I'm criticizing myself. I tend to be a little bit more flaky and such, in that I have a standard thing I send them when I want to invite them on the show, and then once they accept, I have a standard thing I send them that kind of lays out, hey, do you want to have a pre-show and those kind of things. And so it's questions, real simple, not a whole lot of detail because they won't read a long email. It's, do you need help with video or audio? What's your Skype name? Do you want to send me photos for the show, or would you like me to draw them from off your site? And do I have permission to use those photos in the show and in post? And the answer I'll get back is, sounds fun, can't wait. And can't. Well, what about all the questions?
Yeah, no. I sent you a document with all these questions. I actually need you to answer them. Yeah.
So that's one trouble getting through. The other one is that, like you said, no response, and that could be that some photographers people are just bad at responding to email, and you're just one email in the flood of email they get, and they just overlook it, or it could be they're not interested at all. So what I generally do is I'll send out to several people emails saying I want to have you on the show, and I have a standard form for that. That I just
Mike, can you still hear me? Can you guys out in chat hear me? Mike just locked up on me. let's see. Sometimes this happens when we're doing this, and I don't know why it does. So we'll give it just a sec to see if we can reconnect with Mike. Google is doing its thing. Hopefully, it says it's still broadcasting. So you guys, I think, are still hearing me. Mike will reset and come in, and while he's doing that, I'll talk a little bit about. So Yoda says yes, but Nick says no. Let me make sure that. He can now. So maybe it was just locked up on this side. We'll see if he'll recognize as soon as he's done talking. He will. YouTube just died. Interesting. Okay. Let's see. He hasn't died on my end yet, so I'll keep the recorder going on here just to make sure that we've got some things going on until it actually dies. There, Mike dropped. So good. Okay, good. Well, we'll keep going. Mike will come back in here in just a second. With the guest piece, it is, he had mentioned that. You send this information. Both Mike and I have guest spots on our website. So for me, if you go to theaverageguy.tv/guest, and when he comes back, I'll ask him what his is. But we have some guest instructions that we just put on our site that say, hey, if it's your first timer, although I haven't used mine in a while, I'm fortunate that I don't have guests that need it a lot of the time. So, but sometimes if you have a rookie guest in there, it's good to send them a guest list. That happens at Gallup all the time, where we have rookie guests first time that they are in, and it's one of those things where they need some of that instruction. So let's see for you. Mike, can you hear me? I see Mike back in. Yeah. So let's see, Mike. I see you now. Mike? Can you hear me? He's trying to bring things back up online. So. One of those deals where setting up your guest for success is key. I always recommend that you try to interview them at least once before they're on the show. And so it's one of those things where it's helpful. Mike, can you hear me now?
I can hear you, but can you hear me?
I can hear you. Do you have a power outage?
Well, that was interesting. Power supply blew up in that machine.
Oh, wow. Well, that's at least you got a backup.
Yeah, so now I'm on my regular broadcast computer, but I don't know what happened there. I'm gonna have to go buy a power supply as soon as this is over because my UPS kicked in, but the power supply is dead in that machine.
Did you hear it kind of poof? Did it go up in a puff of smoke?
Yeah, and the lights that I have here, of course, from all coming off that same battery. So the battery and the power is good. Computers won't come on at all. So hopefully that's the power supply.
Well, this is a good lesson in podcasting, right? I saw you freeze up, and I always wait just a second because sometimes you come back.
Yeah.
If you're using Google Hangouts, so sometimes just a lockup is real common in Google Hangouts. So I just wait. Then when you stayed frozen, you're like, well, okay, let's just make sure it's me. So I reached out to the chat room. Hey, can you guys still hear me? They're like, yeah, you're still broadcasting. And then I figured, well, something's gone on with Mike, and he'll come back. You're a pro, so. I always figured, well, he'll find his way back into the chat room. Fortunately, you're in a situation where you've got multiple computers. This is where it's actually kind of helpful to have a backup for these kinds of things. Not everybody can afford that, but to have a backup. Bill had asked in chat, what happened to Dave today? So if you're watching this, you're like, who are these goofballs? So Dave is at WordCamp in Canton, Ohio. He actually just checked in, so if you just came in late, you're just catching us live, you can go back in the video. He joined us from WordCamp and is one of the presenters there, having a good time. It's always fun but stressful to turn the show over to your co-host because you're like, does he have all? I mean, really, Dave. And in a minute here, I'm gonna share kind of the setup that I did because this is way different than most people do. So we'll talk about that here in just a second. But good for Dave. It's often hard to give up your show and turn it over to somebody else, but good for Dave for doing that. So, and Mike, you said your lights are on the same power supply?
They're on the same UPS. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
So, but tell Dave thank you for letting me use his show to wear out my equipment and not having it happen on Tuesday night, which is when we're live. So I know what I'm doing the rest of this afternoon.
Yeah, we had talked about, Mike, when you were out, I talked about having that guest page on your site. Mine's theaverageguy.tv/guest. Do you have a guest one that you use when you? I know you do because you
talking about like a preparation guide.
Yeah, guest prep. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I have a Google Doc that I embedded in a page, and I send them that, and I send that link to them for them to go check that out. How many people actually go check it out, I don't know. That's why some of the key points I actually also include in the email I send them. I will say that, just to either wrap that up or continue the conversation, either one, is out of all the guests we've had, I've only had this happen once, and as a fear of mine. But because you don't always get responses from people right away, and because sometimes they don't respond at all, what I will do is, as a guest will come in and they pick a date, is then I send out to everybody who hasn't responded, hey, just wanted to update you on the available dates now open. Because I generally say, here's the dates for our spring and summer season. Tell me which one works for you. And let's say, Jim, you booked the date, but I've asked Dave to come on the show too. I'll email Dave out, and hey, just wanted to give you an update. Here's the available dates that are open now. And it's like one more follow-up to try and get you to now come in and say something to me. I will only do that once or twice, and then I'm going to leave you alone. But if you pick the same date, and then Dave turns right around and has the same date, wants the same date, now I've got to pick one of you to say, no, can you go somewhere else? That happened once, because I don't use any of those schedule ones or any of those kind of calendars like that. I haven't found one I really like, and I've run into that problem just once, fortunately. But it was the guest I really wanted to have on the show.
It's the hassle, if you're going to set your guests up that way. It's one of the drawbacks to it.
Yeah.
But I find it very helpful to give the guest dates. Don't say, hey, can you make it in June, right? I'll say, like, how's June 18th sound? And I find I get way more people to say yes if I give them a date and time instead of letting them pick. So if they're not available on the 18th, well, then how about the 23rd, right? Are you available on the 23rd? And we just go until we get that kind of locked in. In a lot of cases, right now I'm 6 or 7 weeks out, so that allows me to kind of negotiate with one guest at a time, so that I don't run into that problem. So I might be working on getting a guest set. I won't send any other guest invites out until I get that other guest locked in, and then I'll start filling those in. So being 6 or 7 or 8 weeks out on your guest is really helpful that way. Bill had mentioned in chat that the live link is broken. Yeah, it is. The site. I was going to tell Dave that, but he was having so much fun. I was like, no, I'm not going to tell Dave. His site's down at this point. So, because that's just, he's going to go on in 8 minutes. He was going to go to another talk, and he doesn't, because he'll want to fix it like right then. Not that big of a deal. We'll probably have less viewers today because the live link's broken and people don't necessarily know how to get to everything, but that's okay. They'll go back and listen to the recorded version of it. So lots and lots around the guest there. Mike, I want to share a little bit. We've got about 10 or 15 minutes left. I want to share a little bit about the setup that I did today, because it's fairly unique in what we're doing. If you've listened to the show for any length of time, you know that I talk about my broadcast server, which is really just another PC that I set aside, and I connect the Google Hangout to it. So it unifies the audio. So like you and I are coming into this third PC, and it's just listening to the conversation, right? So on the speakers of that PC is coming out your and my audio together. This is what allows me to get around a mix minus. So I don't do any mix minuses. In fact, I said to you yesterday or last night, I'm anti mix minus, and you're like, how can you even say that?
I don't understand why you're anti mix minus.
Why would you be anti mix minus? I do find ways. I find mix minus a little complicated, and it's especially complicated to run sometimes because you got to turn some knobs on the stuff, and I kind of want it to be all automatic. So this broadcast server concept, it kind of allows me to get around that. Oh, I should make sure I'm back on the studio thing for Blog Talk Radio, because we have another caller. Sorry if you've been listening out there. I flipped over to do something. This happens. This is one of those things when you're not watching that you can miss. So let me come back to that discussion. We have a caller. Let me bring them in, and we'll say, if you are caller 3101, welcome to Ask the Podcast Coach. What's your name and what's your question? Well, they were waiting so long, maybe that they put themselves on mute. 3101, that's your last four. You should be live at this point.
Oh, yeah, sorry about that.
There we go. Who's there?
I did have you on mute there, so my apologies. This is Jason Bates.
Hey, Jason, how are you?
Real estate show. Out here in Phoenix, Arizona. My question is, I have an Alesis Multi-Mix 8 with a USB port. And I know you guys are talking some tech today, and by the way, you're doing a very, very good job hosting the show, by the way.
Oh, thank you.
Good job there. And I have the USB hooked into my Multi-Mix 8 Alesis, and I'm running a compressor in there as well. My question is, can I compress the guests, and I use Google Hangouts a lot too for my guests, can I compress, because sometimes they have a lot of background noise or their speaker on their computer isn't very good, and you mentioned, buying your own speaker, and that is a little prima donna kind of thing, but is there any way to hook that up to capture that sound through the mixer and compress it? And I use Audacity to record.
Mike, I'll throw that to you because I know you run it through a compressor.
Yeah, I didn't quite hear everything because I'm not on my main system, and I have to come off the speakers.
Oh, you are
the feedback through here. Can you repeat what he said?
Yeah, so I'll just say it. He's taking your guest and running them through a gate limiter compressor, like you do. How do you have it set up?
What I do is, and I do use mix minus, but I also use the left and right channel to separate them. I have my guest computer, the one that just crashed, and I can smell a little smell coming off that now too.
That's not a good thing. That's never a good thing. Do we need to let you go so you can put the fire out?
Well, there's not like I don't see any flames, so I think I'm safe.
Good.
I'll wait till afterwards. But I have that feed coming straight from the card, the audio card, coming into my limiter gate, and I have the DBX 166XS, which is a dual channel one coming in here. So it comes into the back of that, and then it goes off that gate limiter with an XLR connection from there over to my mixer. And so they all come through there. So I can give them a separate gain. I can give them a separate gate. I can set their gate to where it is right for them. And then I have my mic that I'm talking on now. It goes through that limiter, that gate limiter, and then comes over to the mixer. So we both flow through there. I'm on one channel of the mixer. They're on the other channel. I'm not the mixer of the limiter. I'm on one channel. They're on the other channel.
So, but Mike, the key for you is you have a separate PC that they're coming in on, right? So you have a separate piece of equipment. That's kind of the magic that makes it work.
That's the magic that makes it work for me. Yes. Yeah. I guess if you're coming off the same
the sound card of because I'm only using one computer.
Yeah.
And I guess I'm not very tech savvy, but there's a sound card on the computer, and then there's a sound card on the mixer, correct?
There would be, yes, sort of, right? So you have your sound card. The computer sound card is just like what you think it is. When you plug the mixer in as USB, it actually it looks to the PC, if you're on Windows, and Mac too, it looks like it's a sound card, right? It's a separate sound device. So it'll handle both traffic in and out off of your mixer. So when you plug that in, you're actually enabling a second sound card on the PC to make it work. But you're going to have trouble. You need to isolate that guest, right? This is to get them through the gate, to get them to do what you're doing. You want to isolate them. If you're doing it on your current PC, you're gonna have them and you, and any effects you apply to them is going to get applied to you. So it's super important. If you want to do this, you have to physically get them on a different box, bring their sound in differently, and then run that audio and their audio only through that compressor.
Yeah, because Jim, if you were on the one PC, and like we're here now, we're talking, and I took the feed off of my sound card, it would be both of us, wouldn't it?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It would be, and anything you're running straight through the mixer, because that mixer you're running your voice through it. You've really got to isolate your guest off and get them think of it like a stream of water. This is whenever I'm thinking about audio, I think about in streams of water. And so this is that one kind of thing, like today, Mike and I are doing this, and I use this broadcast server concept, and it unifies everybody's audio into a single stream that then goes out to Spreaker and YouTube and some of those other things, where what you want to do here is isolate your guest off before you add them to the rest of the river. Isolate them off, process their sound, then use the mixer to bring them into the final mix. So, and then you want to record off your mixer. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So I need basically a separate computer and use Google Hangouts on a separate computer, basically.
Yeah, and here's a cheap way to do it. Use a Chrome. Buy one of those Chromebook or Chrome, the little Chrome minis. That's not what they're called. But if you're using Google Hangouts and you're in the browser anyways, buy an inexpensive Chrome device that it's dedicated for your guest's sound, right? And you can bring them, open up a Chrome browser, bring them in the Hangout, come the audio off of that into your gate. And I think they have little Acer or Asus little Chrome boxes, and I think they're like $149 to $199. So it doesn't have to be a really expensive PC to get it done. You could come off of the Chrome OS to use it. Are you familiar with that? Have you seen the Chrome, kind of the Chrome books that are out there?
Yes, I have. And the odd thing is when I do like main out or anything like that from my multi-mix, I get the sound processed in the mixer or in the compressor limiter gate. But then getting it, when I record it through Audacity, when I hit the compression all the way up, you would think it would, compress the sound, but it doesn't compress the sound in Audacity.
Yeah, so you might have Audacity set in a pre, like, so Audacity's getting the audio pre.
In channel 1,
mm-hmm.
And then you have your the output or the input or whatever, and you throw that into I have a Behringer 4600. So I throw that into the Behringer, and then it throws it back into the mixer, and then it goes back to Audacity.
Yeah. So really super hard to troubleshoot.
Do you do that, for example?
Super hard to troubleshoot on this end of the microphone when I can't actually see it or kind of understand the workflow for it. My advice to you is sit down with a piece of paper and physically write out your connections and where things are hitting. So this is a really important. Anytime I'm having an audio problem, I actually write it out on a piece of paper, and I draw it with lines to say, where is this hitting this, right? Because it sounds to me like Audacity may be getting a pre-mixed piece of the audio before it goes to the compressor. And so you want to make sure you're catching that on the back side of it. If that's what you want to record, you got to make sure you're catching it on the post side. And so, again, hard for me to know exactly where that is because I can't see your equipment. But map that out and make sure Audacity's in the right place. And the names of your audio connection on your computer are super important. So when you're doing that, actually write down in Windows the physical connection that it's making there. What's the name of it? Because so you make sure you get it right. You can have, because the board creates a sound card, in Audacity you might be grabbing the board instead of the sound card, or it could be vice versa. You could be grabbing the sound card audio instead of what's coming off the mixer. Now again, I'm making guesses, but write those things down, and they should follow a flow. And at the end of that flow, Audacity should be there.
Yeah, sound is one of the things that took. Go ahead. Sound is one of the things that took me a while to work through too. You just gotta work through all the connections and see what's happening.
Yeah.
And everybody's system's a little bit different, so it took me some time to get all this stuff working. As far as second computers, the way. Of course, now that one of them blew up, it's not necessarily a good example. But the way I've built up this other computers is since I kind of build my own, or if you buy a new one, your old one that still works, you just need it to work good enough to host Skype or Google Hangout, and you can have it as a second computer. Just turn it on whenever you need it for the show.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be very powerful at all.
Right.
In most cases. So, does that help?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, guys. I really appreciate it.
You bet. Thanks for calling in. Appreciate it.
All right, take care. Bye-bye.
All right, have a good weekend. All right, well, hey, Mike, we've got just a few minutes left on this, and as we look, I was talking a little bit about the setup, which kind of dovetails into what he's talking about here. How do I get this audio together? And so we have this separate PC, dovetails in nicely, separate PC. I'm actually running, so I've called into Blog Talk Radio on Skype. So Skype, I bought some Skype minutes. It's like $3 for unlimited U.S. calls, which is super cheap. So I bought the unlimited minutes. I actually called Blog Talk Radio on Skype on this broadcast server. So it's connected to it. When the caller is talking, it's coming out on the speaker port on that computer. And I have this audio jack that goes speaker to microphone. And this Skype and this Google Hangout is then listening on that microphone, right? It's an input into the Hangout that we're having here. It allows that call to come into the Hangout now. So the audio comes in. Well, Blog Talk Radio is going to drop off here in just a second, but we'll let it roll. And so the disadvantage, although I could probably mute Blog Talk Radio right now or end the episode so we don't get that. All we're using it for is the calls. In fact, let's just do that. We'll end it for now as we kind of wrap things up here.
Thank you for using Blog Talk Radio.
You're very welcome. Thank you for letting us use Blog Talk Radio. Thanks for Dave for giving me his account. That was the one piece I needed to get from Dave because he's got all the special magic behind it. But and so that call is that sound, the audio of the caller is routed back into the Google Hangout, and our audio is routed into the through the Skype call. It's Blog Talk Radio is listening for the microphone port, so it makes this nice little loop. And it's not, you'd think you're going to get some audio feedback, and it doesn't work that way. It's fantastic. And so without mix minus, without anything of those having, in fact, I wish I could hold up my mixer. I fried my mixer. There's nothing hooked into the mixer. I went with a PreSonus USB, an audio box USB. Went down to Guitar Center, picked it up for $99 last night. We configured it and made it work. That's how I'm coming through with just an extra PC. So, Mike, that's kind of how you and I have chosen. I mean, I use a pretty big mixer, and I had a mixer for a while until I spilled water on it, but you don't have to have the mixer to do some of this call-in piece. This is not a bad way to do it. Now that I've done it, it's like, okay, that wasn't that hard,
Yeah, once you do it, I mean, this is me. Once I've figured out how all that worked for my setup, you think, why did this take me so long to do it? It seems so simple now. But when you get started and start doing some of that stuff or making changes, it can be complicated and work through. It does help if you have somebody that you can test with, because once you got what you think is working, it's good to test with someone else and make sure they're not hearing some kind of audio feedback or some kind of sound issues that you're not hearing, some kind of popping or cutting in and out, or just hearing themselves back if you've done the mix minus wrong or whatever fake mix minus that Jim uses.
Well, the fake mix minus, nicely done. Last night I called you and I'm like, hey, we got to get this thing configured, and it was not the best sounding right out of the chute, and you and I spent about an hour going back and forth, and I turned knobs and tried some stuff. Ended up going actually with this really cool solution. We'll talk about it more in the future here for sure, called Voicemeeter. I think Dave's talked about that before. MEETER, voice, MEETER, Voicemeter. Kind of a free application, although you can donate, and I'm going to donate because this is really awesome. That's kind of what I'm rolling through on my main PC. That's what allows me to get the music started. So, if we wanted to bring in some final wrap-up music at this point, I'm actually playing that because it's got a virtual audio cable that's grabbing that music and feeding it back into the Hangout, and allows me to play that music kind of behind the scenes. And so, Voicemeter, that in the PreSonus worked for me. I'm going to run with it for a little bit and kind of completely eliminate the mixer. And so far, so good. So with that, Mike, we're going to wrap up this part of the show. We'll stay around for a bit about post-show stuff. We try to keep these about 60 minutes. We want to thank you for coming out and listening to our version of Ask the Podcast Coach. Dave will be back next week. Mike Howard, thanks for jumping in here and filling in with me, doing this with me. Tell folks where they would find you if they wanted to know more about you.
The best place is jpeg2raw.com. JPEG, the number 2, raw, RAW.com. Is the best place to find me.
And if you have questions about how you do your vMix and some of that stuff, they can just email you?
Yeah, email me at podcast@jpeg2raw.com.
All right, very cool. Thanks for putting a bunch of time in this weekend. You were with me last night testing this stuff, and early this morning I just wanted to make sure it all worked. So far,
I like to test.
Yeah, I know. It's fun to learn some new stuff. So we are out here every Saturday morning, 9:30 Central, 10:30 Eastern. Normally it's Dave Jackson in the driver's seat. Dave, I'll be glad to have you back next week. I'll be honest, hosting the show is a lot harder than it seems, but we do this every Saturday morning. Your questions, you call in, askthepodcastcoach.com/live most weeks when it's up and working. We'll be back here, Dave and I, next week. Thanks for coming out, and thanks for being a part of the community. We enjoy it, and thanks for the nice words and compliments from you guys today. We'll see you next week.
Yep. Thanks for having me. Bye, guys.
All right. We did it. Yay.
This is going to drive me nuts. Like hitting the power button every once in a while over here, it will not come on. What has happened to this machine?
Oh man, so up in smoke, huh?
So here's what happened: as I am mid-sentence or talking, all of a sudden, this whole thing goes out. The lights, the computer goes out, and my battery backup just starts beeping, beep, 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 whatever. This machine, of course, is still going on. So when you first lose power and that happens, you think something's in the house has happened. Yeah. We lost power in the house, but both of these are on UPSs. So I should be, and the network equipment is all on UPSs. So a blip in power should not kick me off the show or do anything like that. But since my main machine was still running, I knew something was wrong. I went and reset the battery back up and started it. Lights came back on, but computer did not. And now it won't come back on. So I'm hoping it actually is the power supply. Because I guess the other thing it could be is the CPU fried or something, which would, I don't know why that would be.
That's just my hotness just smoked it.
Yeah, it was totally your hotness.
So I'm coming through your speakers now? Is that
You're coming through the speakers, and this is a case where the gate is, so hopefully you're not hearing yourself back.
No,
and I
can
see on my DBX 166, I can see the gate when it's open and closed. So whenever I stop talking and you start talking, it's showing it's closed. So in theory, even though you're coming through the speakers, you should not be able to hear anything back.
Nope, not hearing it. It actually worked pretty well. Your audio wasn't that much different on the second PC than it was on the first coming in. Right. And so you recovered from that gracefully. I think the key on this, right, is because that happens, right? I mean, you're podcasting and bam, something goes wrong. The trick is just to never panic.
Yeah.
So Yoda says, and Brian, by the way, thanks for joining us this morning. You must have caught my my Spreaker announcement on there. It says it sounds like the UPS line conditioner.
No. Obviously, as soon as this is over, I'm going to be looking to see what happened there.
And Nick Suberling just said that's the clamor for the show is my hotness smoked it.
and somebody I missed it as it streamed off there and what I'm looking at because. I was watching chat, of course, on the machine that died, and Dave's site is dead, so I can't pull up chat again. So I just typed in, I went to Google, typed in Chatwing, Ask the Podcast Coach, and it found the link, and so I was able to pull up the Chatwing again, and I saw somebody.
It's just chatwing.com/school podcast.
What's that?
It's just chatwing.com/school podcasting.
I did not know that because I got chatbox/3F71 and so on.
Oh, you got the kind of the behind the scenes one, yeah.
Yeah, but Joe Taylor had said he used Time Trade for his scheduling, so I need to look at that Time Trade. And then someone else posted their link for their interview for people to go look at.
Yeah, Bill. I think Bill posted that out there.
And I have a guest preparation thing too that has a lot of stuff in it. I just want to include like a very summary thing in the email, but. Some photographers don't want to read all that stuff. I had a co-host. My co-host, Kathleen, who was a co-host for about 30 shows, I would send her an email that said, hey, Kathleen, would you like to do this, or this, talking about the show? And she'd call back and say, yeah. I mean, she'd email back and say, yeah. Which one?
No, I actually need you to read the email and tell me which is the right one.
Sounds great. It wasn't like it was a question.
I know.
Sometimes getting them to read that stuff.
I'm guilty of that at work sometimes too, where people are looking for stuff. I'm like, no, that sounds great. And they're like, no, they're actually looking for your pin, Jim, which means you actually need to read the thing. And I've been guilty of that myself. Bill Conrad had asked how much is Blog Talk Radio. Right now, it's $40 a month, which is pretty steep for just a call queue. I mean, that's kind of what we're using it for. I didn't. I'll have to go back and listen to the audio quality here of it on Blog Talk Radio. I didn't make a direct connection to it like Dave does, so it probably wasn't very good. I just called in on Skype. I think I could have used Skype to make the direct connection. That would have been smarter.
Yeah, Nick says he uses Skype.
Yeah. Well, you could use Skype. You could use anything that'll accept a call. You just don't have a call queue, right? That's the big benefit. I mean, Blog Talk Radio is so easy to use. I mean, I brought that up, and man, the call pops up, and you just unmute them. Now, I've often thought about using like GoToMeeting, where all callers come in muted, and then you unmute them, and that would build a queue for you if you use GoToMeeting to do it, right? People could call into the conference line. That's just as expensive as Blog Talk Radio. I almost called it Call Talk Radio. As Blog Talk Radio is, those GoToMeeting plans are pretty expensive. So I have to double check on that. But that would be what you're looking for. You could use, you could use Adobe Connect to actually do this. Bring them in. Now that's like using a tractor to get good to go down to the supermarket, right? You just it's using the wrong tool it'll get you there, wrong tool for the wrong job, for the right job. But you could Adobe Connect has that same kind of conferencing capability where you can bring people in muted.
I've never really looked at Adobe Connect. How?
It's really a training and education platform. You can put PowerPoint slides in there and presentations and play videos, and you could do this. Actually, you could do this whole thing on Adobe Connect and actually make it really. The one thing you'd have to do is a screen capture to send to send the platform. It's meant for people to come in on the web. Although, if you have the right licensing, it's $5. It's $500 a year though. So
Adobe Connect?
For Adobe Connect, yeah, you're going to pay. I mean, the enterprise that's cheap. Right? Yeah, you're like, oh, $500 a year? Oh, yeah, but like out of my own pocket,
yeah,
$500 is expensive.
Well, I'm looking at GoToMeeting. It's $480 a year.
Yeah, so it's just as expensive, right, to do those kind of conference calling. But if maybe you could find there's one of those cheap conference call providers that does a free thing, and maybe. Even if you could get up to 5 people on the conference call where you muted them when they came in, and then because we never get more than 1 or 2 callers in queue at a time for what we're doing.
Right.
So the Blog Talk Radio is a super powerful platform to be able to do that. We don't broadcast through that, so you're not at a disadvantage from a quality standpoint.
I would like to point out one thing before we go further. I did not spill anything into my computer.
Oh, it's funny when I told you last night that I had spilled water, and you were like, "Okay, Jim, what are you gonna, how are you gonna change?" I had actually the last time I did this, I spilled wine into the.
I see a pattern.
So, now the good news was it was a crappy old mixer that was probably 10 or 15 years old, and it needed to be replaced anyways. But just got me started, and then then I bought this one, and I had it sitting over here. So my drinks are here, and if you're listening to the audio, which you would never hear the audio of this part, but the board was over here. Well, I reconfigured my desk space, and the only place I could put the board was right in front of me. Well, that's dangerously close to the drinks, and that's again proved to be my downfall.
So you're talking about GoToMeeting or the Adobe Connect. The beauty of something like Skype is, for my community of photographers, is really every photographer I'm going to ask to come on the show has used Skype. They're familiar with Skype. They have Skype. It's no big problem. When we started using some Google Hangouts and with the video mixing software I have, vMix, how you get the video is really not that important. You Skype or Google Hangouts, it doesn't really matter. But when I'm using Google Hangouts, maybe about 80% of them have used it, so there was a small of them that hadn't used it and had to help them through it. But with something like GoToMeeting and with Adobe Connect, is there going to be something they're going to need to download, and they're going to need to do some setup on their end?
Yeah, if they were going to be part of it, yes. Yeah.
That's one of my fears is the more you ask for them to do, some of these people, trying to get it on the show, they're not very tech savvy. They may not want to go through too much effort. They just want to show up, do their thing, and then leave. Others, of course, have no problem with it, but I don't want to reduce my pool of people that I can ask to come on the show. So I try to have them do as little as possible.
Yeah, no, right on. If you were going to try and make Connect or GoToMeeting as your platform, they're going to have to install, in a lot of cases, to get the best audio, they're going to have to install those controllers. To be honest with you, they have to do it if they're going to use anything but Chrome if you're using Google Hangouts. So Google has now built in that plugin to the Chrome browser, so you don't see that anymore. It's one of the advantages to using Chrome. But it's complicated. That's why I do pre-calls at Gallup. Every single guest gets pre-call. and we do a 15 or 20 minute tech call. Besides, the host calls them early too to make sure that they're prepped in that way. So our guests spend probably 45 minutes with us before the show, and then a 45-minute show. So they give us kind of twice the length of the show to get that done. But it's one of those ways to make sure that it's going to work right. Nick says he sees Dave started yet another podcast. Which one, Nick? I didn't realize he did. And then Yoda, you had put bluejeans.com, but I think you said blue. There we go. He was talking about we were talking about a free conference call, or nearly free. And it's Blue Jeans. This is what he put in there. So let's see if we can get some pricing with these guys. Try it for free. Yoda, do they have free plans, or at least cheaper plans to get people in to call? Because what I want is a call-in number that somebody can call. I get a static number that I have. That's the advantage of Blog Talk Radio. They give you a static number when you sign up. And then I want to be able to, with no PIN, don't want them to do that. Just dial and drop in the conference. That's what I want. So, yeah. Clamorcast.com. Oh, serious? I did not know this. Clamorcast. A weekly. Interesting. I bought validatemyfeed.com. I haven't talked. This is the first time I've announced this. That I bought validatemyfeed.com. Now it's not. The site's not very good right now. In fact, it's terrible. I just the other day was working on it. I picked up one. The trick will be to aggregate all. In fact, is it even up? It's running on Azure. Yeah, there it goes. So what I want to do is aggregate all the feed aggregates, the feed testers, and make a few comments about the best ones, maybe even rank them in what I think is the best. It was an idea. We were talking about feed validation, and I said, this should be as easy as validatemyfeed.com. And I went out and checked it, and it was available, so I bought it. I was like, oh, really? Yeah. I thought, so if I can get some good Google SEO out of this, validate my feed, right? When people are searching, that's kind of what I need to validate my feed.
ValidateMyFeed.com was not taken?
Was not taken. It is now. I own it.
Yeah, that's one of those things you say after you've already taken it.
Yes. Yeah, I tried it on the show. It was during the show that I looked it up, and then it was during this show, I think 2 weeks ago. And I was like, well, do I really need another website? And then I was chatting with somebody about Azure the other day. I think it was on Dave's show, Dave McCabe, over at homeservershow.com. And I said, well, that'd be a good site to host, just to have fun with, just to try it out, pump it full of SEO and see what I get out of it. So it had been a while since I'd started a new site. So I'm like, yeah, I'm going to use this one. So I went and bought it and pointed it over to set up Azure, and went and set it and pointed validate my feed over to that site. And it's on Azure. I think it's validatemyfeed.azurewebsites.net, and then I do a redirect. Technically, I don't. I do a DNS over to it. So so I'm gonna make some posts and pump some feeds in there, and it'll be one of those kinds of things like, hopefully it'll be a helpful site when people are looking. It'll be the go-to site when people are looking for all the different places that do it and do it well, because I know there's some that don't, right? It's like feedvalidator.com. I think that's one of the feedvalidator.com is one of those old ones that's not doing its job anymore, or something like that. I could be wrong.
Nick had a question out there. You see that question?
Yeah, go ahead. I said, been meaning to ask. I host my podcasts on Hangout on Air, but I don't publish the video as an RSS feed. Is this something worth doing? Nick, yes. It absolutely is worth doing. And this is, for the longest time, I only pushed out audio for Home Gadget Geeks. And I put the video on YouTube, and I thought that was enough. And my listeners...
Someone had told you to not... Someone had told you to do that.
Yes, so Mike Howard had told me a long time ago, you got to make that, you got to put the video out on a feed. And I'm like, I don't want to host it. I don't want to, the bandwidth's an issue because I put out both a video large and a video small, and I was paying for bandwidth at the time, and actually I wasn't, but I still didn't want to do it. Well, then I found Mediafire, and you get gigantic bandwidth capabilities, and it's $24 a year. And so I felt like that justified moving to video. So bring the video down from YouTube. I mix it for the YouTube. So I create this fairly large file that's going to go directly to YouTube, and then they're going to crunch it. Then I use Handbrake. This is what Mike taught me to do as well. I use Handbrake, and I crunch that down into a 690 feed and a 320, which really crunches that thing down. And there's presets in Handbrake. I think one's for the iPad and one's for a iPod Touch or something. I'd have to go back and look.
Yeah.
And so those crunch down to about, the video small is really only twice as big as the audio, and it's 100 meg or so, 120 meg, right, which is not very big.
Yeah.
And I pushed. Now, okay, so it's great that I did that, but what's happened? Well, since then, the Home Gadget Geeks video feed has gone up, and I get hundreds now of those downloaded every week. The video large is more in the tens, so it's probably 75, 80, somewhere in there. But my listeners wanted it. They've voted with their RSS feed download. So yeah, I think you should, Nick.
Now, for me, my show is a photography show, so it may be different than other people. And so mine, I really like having the video. We do a video, final video, edited video that is for YouTube. That's high def and all that kind of stuff, and the high bit rate and everything, because you don't care on YouTube, they'll re-encode it. Then I do a video large, which is still a 1080p. No, I'm sorry. Yeah, it's a 1080p feed, because we also use that feed to hit TiVo and some other set-top boxes. So I want that to be a higher feed. So we have video large, which is 1080p, and then I have a video small, which is 360p. And if you exclude YouTube, so this is just the RSS feed stuff, and we have an audio and 2 video feeds, the video feeds account for about 60% of our downloads versus the audio. Now, if you include YouTube, it's more like 80% of our stuff is video. I self-host all of that stuff on my DreamHost account, and both the audio and the video files. If it ever became an issue, because like he said, video is expensive to host. If it ever became an issue and they said I'm using too much bandwidth, well, maybe I'll just open a second account at DreamHost and split the files between the two and host it that way. Because Libsyn and Blueberry are just too expensive to host the kind of video files I'm hosting.
Yeah, that's one way to do it for sure, right? I mean, if you can, bandwidth's expensive, and so if you're going to go this route, you need to make sure it's really not that expensive anymore, but you need to make sure you're going this in a route where it's not going to kill you. One of the nice things about MediaFire as a video only, so I only let MediaFire host my videos. That's all I do on that. Is that they have rollover minutes. That's kind of what I call it. It's really rollover bandwidth. So they give you 10 terabytes of bandwidth a month. I think that's right. And if you don't use it, they roll it over. And I think I've stored up 80 terabytes of bandwidth. I'll never consume as much bandwidth as they. And I've even hit new and noteworthy with one of those feeds, and the small feed went up to thousands. I was doing 25 or 3,000 downloads for a couple weeks. Didn't even blip, not even a blip on the radar for MediaFire. So in a great place, we talked about MediaFire a ways back, a great place for cold storage, if you think about it in that way. If you're using S3 Glacier, MediaFire is actually cheaper, and you can move your data out there and just store it there. They give you a terabyte of space for $24. And Nick, I've had them on my show. So if you go to theaverageguy.tv and in the search box, just search MediaFire. I interview their CEO over there, and so you can. There's a whole conversation. It's from last fall. Not much has changed, to be honest with you. These guys built this big server farm down in Texas, and they got plenty of bandwidth and plenty of storage, and they're trying to drive the cost down to $10 a month. That's kind of on the show. He's like, we'd like to get to be able to offer $10, not a month, $10 a year, for this terabyte of space that you have out there. So Bill asked, why not use YouTube? All right. Well, I got in trouble last time I had this conversation, but YouTube's subscription model is the worst of all time. The subscription link stuff doesn't work, and you can't You can, but you shouldn't. You can't make your RSS stuff work on YouTube. It's just not going to work, right? And so if you want people to be able to download the video, and this is where it was super important for my listeners, they wanted to download the video to watch on a plane or commuting, those kinds of things. They wanted the video. That doesn't work for YouTube. YouTube's got great discovery. You need to be there too. Right? It's not either or. You need to be on YouTube because it's got great discovery, but you also need to provide RSS feeds, I think, large and small video for your listeners. They want those. Mine did. Ask them. This is one of those things. Ask your listeners. Do you want this? Mine did, and so I gave it to them, and that's the way it worked.
And ask how much editing do you do? Nick asked how much editing do we do. I don't do a lot of editing. I actually edit my audio first. And I have me in one channel and the guest and the host in another channel. So I edit that left and right channel separately for noise and for whatever else. Then bring them into a mono channel together. And I got that process down. It doesn't take me that long. Then bring that into my video editor. I use Adobe Premiere because it comes with Creative Cloud. So I bring that in, line up the sync with that. With the audio that came with the video, and then really just chop off the pre-show and chop off the post-show, and then output it. So I don't do a ton of editing with that. Unlike with the audio where you might take out, some blips or something like that. If you start messing with that kind of stuff in audio and video, you're going to have a choppy video. It's not going to transition just right.
Yeah, so I'm very similar to you in the sense. So I download, we create these videos on Hangouts.
Yeah.
I download the raw MP4. In fact, I've got one waiting to go. I'll right-click on it and put it in Movie Maker, Windows Movie Maker. I actually do all my edits there. It's a free movie editor. It works, video editor. It works great for me. I'll add a front card and an end card to make it work. I'll add some music to it, so that probably takes, I bet, 20 minutes to do the video. And then I crank that out as in Movie Maker. There's a Android medium setting, so still a pretty big file, but not the full gigantic size, right? But still a pretty big file.
Yeah. And
I drop that out. That's going to be my master video file. Then I upload that to YouTube, which I would do anyways. When that's done, I use Handbrake to rip the 960 and the 10 or the 320 version of it. Then I move those over to MediaFire, and then I'm done. Right? I mean, so I'm using that same video 3 times. So there isn't that much more. It takes a while because it's got to encode,
right,
and it has to upload, right? But I can do other things while that's doing it. So how much extra work to create an RSS feed from that? Well, there's probably an hour or two worth of work to get the RSS feed set up. I would use, if you're in WordPress, I would use channels, not categories, channels on that in PowerPress. And once you have those set up in the RSS feeds, and then you get it over to MediaFire, you're done. It's just a matter of right-click, grab that, this is where MediaFire's dynamite because they allow direct links to your MP3. Grab that, paste it in PowerPress, under the channel feed, hit validate, hit save, you're done. So and then when not that much extra work.
And then when you go to do the post, below the post, if you're using PowerPress, you'll have 3 things to enter your file locations and your author name and that kind of stuff you have for the channels.
Yeah.
The podcast, and I have a video large, video small. And I use a common theme to my names. So let's say it's show number 145, video large, I would have J2R145VL. And so all I got to change when I copy and paste that for show number 146 is just copy and paste last week's and change the 5 to a 6 and validate the thing, and it's good. So it's not that much extra to create every time.
No, it's actually, once you get it in your workflow, pretty simple to do. And I think this is what Bill's asking in chat. He said, can you also shoot the RSS feed to iTunes? Absolutely. So you take your video small and your video large, and you in the channels, you get those. There's a separate place for iTunes. You get that all set up, and then you grab that RSS feed, go to iTunes, and submit it as a podcast. And now I have 3 feeds. So if you go to Home Gadget Geeks in iTunes, you would see I have 3 feeds. I have an audio only, video large, video small. And I actually include that in the title so the folks that are grabbing it will know. And, man, it works great.
Also, I do the same thing. I have the 3 feeds in iTunes, and I don't know if this does any good or not, but I wonder if having 3 of you there now for the same show actually gives you any better search if somebody's looking for you versus the one.
I think it gives you more credibility, Mike. right?
Yeah.
So they're like, whoa, this guy's got audio and video. I mean, I remember when Laporte did that, and I'm like, that's freaking genius.
Well, if you look at like what's hot, and you go there and you look at the list, and your show shows up 3 times because you got 3 feeds. That's makes you feel good. But
Right.
you mentioned you do your show in the Movie Maker, then you do it again in the Handbrake. If Nick said he's using Premiere Pro like I am, you can actually maybe whatever video software you're using, you might be able to output all those things from that same place. So
Yes.
for me, Premiere Pro, once I've edited and done my thing, and I put a intro and exit music too. Once I'm done with that, I tell it, all right, export an audio file, the MP3 file, export the video large for YouTube, export the video large, and export the video small. And then I just set it off, and I generally might do that as I go to bed or as I'm going to go do something else, because it's going to take about 90% CPU usage for a couple of hours.
Yeah. Nick just helped Joe fix his mixer problem with the solo piece. So hey, our job is done. Our job is done here. Chat room, help each other. That's pretty. Hey, this is why I podcast, right? This is why I do this, because these kinds of things happen, and you're like, people are like, wow, I actually got this fixed, and that makes you feel pretty good when at the end of the day you've helped. I mean, we haven't directly fixed it, but these guys got some stuff done in there.
Yeah.
Mike, you just gave me an idea though. I don't necessarily know. I move it to Handbrake, but I'm not sure I need to do that. I could be probably cranking that out in Movie Maker. I've got so used to crunching video in Handbrake that it was just part of one of the things I do like about Handbrake that I don't get in Movie Maker is I can set those files up on a queue. So I can load them up and wait, and then when I'm ready to go, just hit run queue, and it'll run both of those simultaneously, and I don't have to be there in case then I want to walk away. It'll run both, and they'll be ready for me when I get back.
And Premiere can do that, but you're not using Premiere. The one thing, if you can, is if you're doing it all in the same program, like I am with Premiere, it's not having to re-encode. So every time it's doing that encoding for the video, YouTube, video large, video small, it's using that original source to create that new file. In the case that you're doing, you're creating a file that's been compressed, then taking it to Handbrake, and then recompressing it out to another file. It may not be a noticeable difference, so it may be fine, but anytime you're recompressing, you are adding.
That's a good point.
You are adding some. You're degrading the signal.
Good point. I've looked at my video and I haven't noticed any. It would be most noticeable in the audio, to be honest. That's where you would really see it, because on a little screen. Well, you can compress the hell out of that before people actually notice.
Right, and one of the things you're gaining by, just like with photos, as you take a larger file and you shrink it to a smaller file, it actually helps get rid of some of those artifacts and make it a crisper thing. But you're right, the audio doesn't matter what screen size you have.
Yeah, exactly. If you can really notice when you compress audio, right? Then it's like, oh, that's compressed.
Yeah.
Enter in Stitcher at this point. You can really hear the compression that Stitcher is using for theirs. But yeah, no, that's interesting. You gave me something new to think about. When I'm doing Home Gadget Geeks this weekend, I'm gonna look through the options that I have in Windows Movie Maker. The other thing, like I've optimized the Handbrake tool to get me the file size that I want, right? So I've got those all figured out. Sometimes when you change the way you do it, it's going to give you a smaller file or a larger file, or it's going to compress the audio a different way,
Premiere gave me a bigger file. I did like that I had my video large was exactly the same file size every week. That just meant that it added more or less compression.
Yeah.
The videos large, video small were always exactly the same size, whether we went 57 minutes or an hour and 5 minutes, it was always the same size.
Yeah, that's nice.
Yeah,
that part's kind of nice, because then your users can kind of know what their bandwidth. Although we're getting away from that, where that's important. I haven't had a bandwidth complaint in a long time, where somebody's like, "Hey, can you give me an audio file that's a little bit smaller? You're killing my bandwidth," type deal.
Well, the weird thing for us is that our video large, which when we went to Premiere went from, I think we were doing 500 meg, it's gone up to about 800 meg now for the video large. It has 3 times the subscribers as our video small.
Oh, the large does.
Yeah, so people choose to have the video large.
Well, because your podcast is video driven, right? You've got all these sweet pictures in there, boudoir episode, and it's it makes sense, right? Where for me on Home Gadget Geeks, the video small is by far the most popular.
Yeah.
Because people are like, well, Jim, you're not that great looking anyway, so it's talking heads, right? We rarely show anything on the screen, and if we were doing on screen, they could either go to YouTube to get it or go up to the video large if they wanted to make that available. So, well, I almost feel like, Mike, we should as we depart out of here, we should play the kind of music one more time to say thanks. Big thanks to Dave Jackson for kind of giving me the reins again here. We're in the post show. I doubt this will ever make it to any kind of real show, but again, Mike, thanks for staying around. A lot of fun. It's so much fun to come out and just kind of hang out and talk podcasting. So, Mike, thanks for again giving me about 3 hours this weekend to make it work already. So appreciate you doing that.
Yep, no problem. Keep me in your thoughts as I work on my computer.
Oh yeah. You've got a little extra work to do today.
I do. I gotta get that solved before my show.
Yeah, and when are you live?
Tuesday nights at 8:30. Although our guest canceled for Tuesday night.
8:30 Eastern?
Our guest canceled for Tuesday night, so we got to figure out what we're going to do.
Tuesday nights, 8:30 Eastern, jpeg2raw.com/live, right?
That's live, yeah.
Yeah, and JPEG is JPEG 2, the number 2, and then raw.
Correct.
RAW.com. We'll get you over there. And he's live on Tuesdays. Have a listen. It's a really good, if you're a photographer, I think it's the number one podcast for photographers, right?
Number one podcast for photographers, broadcast weekly, live, with video, where you can ask questions and chat. I think if you combine all those things, we are number one.
By the way, the best way to get a number one rating in anything is just make yourself so exclusive.
Yes,
you can only be the only one.
Make a category where you're the only one in it.
That's funny. All right, we'll be back. Dave will be back next Saturday. AskThePodcastCoach.com/live. Hopefully the site will be up by that point, and we'll see you next week.
You guys, thanks for having me on.